like to introduce my esteemed colleague and Global Board of Trustees, the man who has built Genpact, taken it to several countries. Mr. Pramod Bhasin, it's my privilege to welcome you to talk about the future of BPO. Please welcome onto the stage, sir.
Pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be invited to this forum. It's my first time at TiEcon in Silicon Valley, although, of course, I have the pleasure and privilege of being the president of TiEcon in New Delhi, which is, up and running and flourishing, given the entire nature of startups that's happening around the world. And it's a fever at this point in time in India. They asked me to come and talk to you about the future of BPO, and I thought, my God, where do I take that topic? It's a huge topic, but it'll be an interesting topic. So first, let me try and say, what does BPO mean? A lot of people have a lot of different impressions of what that means, but let me go back a little bit in time. It was my idea to start this enterprise as part of GE Capital in India. We took it to a different level. We built it up. Genpact is now a public company in New York Stock Exchange, about 75,000 employees in about 28 countries around the world. And BPM and BPO, whatever you call it, business process management or outsourcing, is actually looking at an end-to-end process. So any company that has a supply chain, or if you do finance and accounting, or if you do controllership, or if you book receivables, managing that process end-to-end is really becoming what these companies are all about. So there are many examples I can give you. If there is a GE CT scanner in a hospital in America and there's a problem with it, that phone call comes to us. That phone call comes to our medical technicians who can remotely diagnose what was wrong, find out what part was required, send the right person there, and get it fixed. If Nissan wants to deal with its spare parts and understand what level of inventories they need to maintain for spare parts, not just around the world, but in Japan, in specific countries like China, they again come to us with our analytics. We use our analytics, we use our modeling techniques to get there. It started, of course, with labor arbitrage. Labor arbitrage exists and will survive for many years because no matter what you do with the math, the fact is America's pay scale is that much ahead of the work that needs to be done in India. And India, even at an 8% inflation on salaries, is not going to catch up for a very long time. But at this point in time, there are thousands of companies trying this out. Why? Because it has few defenses. It is easy to start up. You put up a building, you put up a phone line, and you can get going. It is not call centers. That is one very minor piece of what it does. But today, BPM, business process management, requires the entire spectrum, from judgment to analytics. So if you're buying, for instance, if I'm managing the end-to-end operations of a supply chain, we're involved in who's buying what, why are they buying it, what is the price at which they're buying it, how do you auction, how do you find the suppliers, where do you go with that, how do you make sure that you get the right goods and services at the right time, how do you pay for it, and how do you save money doing that entire process. But the fact is that labor arbitrage is dead, because so many companies and all the global people are sitting in the countries in which we perform. Genpact is now 75,000 employees. I stepped down as a CEO many years ago, but I'm still the founder of the company, I guess. But we've started this same business, was something we started in China, in Dalian, where we serve Japan, in Romania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Budapest, from where we serve all of Europe, in Guatemala, in Mexico, in Colombia, and Brazil, from where we serve the Latin American-speaking population, as well as the US population. What does it involve? It involves the largest analytics center in India. We have 5,000 people who only do analytics. They provide these services to banks. They provide these services to consumer goods companies, to consumer packaging companies, to logistics companies, to non-bank financial services, to investment banks. It's a global resource. What else do we do? What else do companies like us do in BPO? Well, they provide judgment calls. So we have people, if a claim for over $500,000 for healthcare comes through, or a claim for over $100,000 comes through from a reassurance client, we have nurses and doctors who are actually analyzing that claim to understand whether the right treatment was delivered for the right people at the right cost, and whether or not that claim should be allowed or disallowed. So it's far gone past into the knowledge phase. What's going to happen? When we talk about let me go back to one other thing. The impact of this industry has been profound across India. So if you come to places like Gurgaon didn't exist when we started this. It was one building, one corporate center, and nothing else existed in Gurgaon. It was true to its own name. It was a village. It was a gaon. It's now transformed. The same was true of Hyderabad. The same is true of many other cities. More than that, it has transformed, for instance, the lives of so many women. 50 to 60% of the employees in our companies are women. They are economically empowered. They're working in a good environment. They have moved away, perhaps sometimes from their homes, and they have jobs and they get to travel. It gives them confidence, and for their families, it gives them a new way and hope of thinking, and of economic empowerment, which allows them to do so much more than they could ever do in their lives before. It has powered real estate. A lot of the growth in India has come from the consumerism of this young population, from the demographics, and it has powered real estate. So real estate building that has happened in cities like Gurgaon has also been powered by this. But the question really that I wanted to try and address was, where will this go? Well, labor arbitrage is over. So the question is, what will companies like ours and many others do in this space? By the way, the media and the press and the world tends to announce the untimely death of most industries rather quicker than they ever die. I keep hearing about the disruptive nature of everything, and yet the world is so much the same. I wonder why. I also come to America, and there's so much talk about technology and productivity, and I go to India and I go to China, and of course it helps in some areas, but overall productivity, particularly in America, has gone down, not up. Similarly, we're still seeing the impact of some fast flow-through technology, but we're still not seeing the impact of many other things that actually should happen by leapfrogging and taking some of the great examples of the work that has been done in America and bringing them there. Let me talk to you about a few of these. So one, our work needs to translate into the expertise that our clients, mainly based here in the US, now demand. So when a company comes to us, particularly from the US and particularly from highly developed economies like Germany, etc., Scandinavia, the UK, of course, they don't ask for services. We are no longer going to be order takers. We have to provide a complete solution. So when they say, they're getting to the point where they say, I need to buy paper cartons, you find out, get me the best price, get it done, have it delivered to my office, account for it, and let me know how much I need to pay to whom. It is a full service, much as ADP or payroll is a full service. If you do a courier service, you don't call it outsourcing to a courier company. You buy a courier service because they do it better than you. Across our industry, that is the game that is going to change. We're all going to have to become experts in whatever we do. So if I provide finance and accounting services to companies, which we do through about 20,000 employees around the world, we have to be at a point where we are being able to provide them these services all told, so that the client at the other end really doesn't care about who's doing it. They're agnostic, and it's a seamless proposition. They don't care which part of the world the service is being done from. Just like when you buy a product, you rarely look. Of course, you do with interest, but it doesn't affect you whether it's made in China, Indonesia, Pakistan, India, the US, or Mexico. You buy the product, and in the same way, we will have to be buying the services as we go forward. Given the impact of digitization, machine learning, automation, all of these things that are happening, it forces companies like us to move up the value chain. So now if you see the makeup of our workforce, I'll give you some examples which are somewhat staggering, but I think we are blessed by the law of large numbers in a country like India. We have 20,000 people trained in Lean. We have 12,000 green belts. We employ 5,000 MBAs. We employ 2,000 chartered accountants. That is the scale and quality of work that is actually being performed in these places, and that trend will continue. India's demographics suggest that in about 10 to 15 years' time, India will have 25 to 30% of the world's entire workforce. Entire workforce. The implications of that is something I don't think any of us have begun to grasp or figure out. Of course, what I loved, I was just listening to Vivek Vadva in the other room, and he was making some wonderful statement. You know, it is now cheaper to manufacture in America in some parts than it is perhaps in China or parts of Europe. It may be even easier and cheaper when you take the cost and hassle of doing business in India to manufacture here. But nevertheless, in the services and the productized services area, there is a massive demand which countries like India, and it's not related to India anymore. This is now going to be served globally. What I talk about is accidents of history. That's how we were born. Why do we serve the West from India? Because we speak English. Why do we serve Japan from China? Because they have Japanese-speaking Chinese. Why do I serve Europe from Romania? Because our Romanian employees speak 14 different languages. Why will we go to Colombia? Why will we go to Brazil? Because all of these will be accidents of history in some level where we have connections, deep connections, historical reasons to serve another country from them. As we build this expertise, we're going to have to build real experts, obviously. So when will we get the leading expert in supply chain in the world? Analytics is a subject that is talked about all the time. But you know, quite honestly, since we run analytics and have run them, I haven't yet seen analytics achieve the results it needs to. I have seen it pick up data. I have seen lots of companies. They talk about Uber. They talk about everybody. Lots of banks, online commerce. I still haven't seen behavioral predictiveness through analytics. That's the holy grail. That's the kind of thing we should work on. So it's not just about to tell you what to do in analytics and who to lend to, but it must tell you why. It must be able to predict out. It must be able to find counters of environment, of characteristics of the business. Why does someone make a buying decision at the time they do? We still are not in a position to do that. What we can tell you is when they bought, how much they bought, why did they buy. And we accumulate all that information to try and get to a predictive model. But that predictive model still isn't being defined in a way with behavioral psychology and all of the other things, which allows you to say, now I can tell you that this group of people is likely to buy X, Y, or Z, or behave in a certain fashion, or borrow money, or do something else. When we get to that level, we will have built real expertise in analytics. So for instance, let me ask you about bank mortgages. Even today, mortgages around the world are done with a variability which is huge. There is no reason why a mortgage around the world shouldn't be done exactly the same way. Some of the documents are different, but the fundamental nature of what you're doing is exactly the same anywhere in the world. And yet, nobody has standardized that. Nobody has got a cookie cutter for it. By the way, if you make this piece of paper, there is a standard way of making it which is followed all over the world. There are about 5 different types of machines, and they all make it. You may add or subtract a few pieces here and there. But every process that any company does has its own variability. Everybody reinvents the wheel. Everybody finds a different way to pay for buying a computer. When those things get standardized is when we'll get to the limit of automation and our own industry. So let me talk to you about what I think the future may hold here. One, this work will be done seamlessly. You won't care and you won't know as to where the work is being performed. If we choose to do it out of India, or we choose to do it out of Colombia, or we choose to do it right out of Atlanta, Georgia, you won't care and you won't know. Machine learning will change and make language ubiquitous. You don't really need language anymore. In about 3 years from now, I would think languages will have changed completely to a point where it's totally translated by machines. We will build many new models. By the way, we still haven't begun to do what was the holy grail for me always. So we serve a lot of banks and a lot of investment banks from our back offices in India. What I have always wanted to do is be the bank. be the investment bank. Have the entire front end here, but the entire back end somewhere else. Why can't we become the virtual company? And I think over time, we go away from being order takers. But today, if I'm doing a mortgage process for a bank, the bank makes a lot of money off the loan, of the time of the loan, of the fees, and pays me a small fraction of that. I want to go to a point where I do the entire thing. I'll do the loan, I'll do the mortgage. I will then sell that mortgage to the bank for a small fraction of what I billed it for and keep the bulk of the profits. That day hasn't come. Let me ask you why in data management, marketing services, etc., I can't do all of that from where I sit, whichever country it may be. Romania has some fantastic talent in analytics. I don't know if you knew that. Russia has some fabulous talent in engineering. India has some fabulous talent in finance. When do we really reach the true globalization of talent and supply chain of talent as we go forward? Because that's when we will come out with a whole range of new products which will catapult this industry into a much higher level value-added situation. I also think we must build capabilities today, and we are doing it, around all the new buzzwords and all the new industries that are coming up. So the cloud, the Internet of Things, the amount of data the Internet of Things is pushing out, and everybody, of course, knows that we have to use supercomputers, we have to use all the algorithms that we can to make sense of it. But still, at the end of that, you know, you have to do something with that data. Someone has to look at it and make a judgment call and say, go this way instead of that. Sell more of this or less of that. Lend more here, lend less there. Increase the price here, decrease the price there. How that decision is made is how this industry will work. At some point in time, we will be able to go there and tell companies, you've collected all this data, this is the massive information, this is the out of that massive information, 90% is garbage, throw it out. 10% matters. This is what it is. This is what it's telling you. This is what we would suggest you do. We're getting to that point where, because we are building up expertise in these areas, which is very, very critical, and, by the way, unique as a differentiator for India. When you think of automation, when you think of robotics, when you think of healthcare, these are all areas where we can actually play a huge role. We have to find local solutions in India and then be able to take them to the rest of the world. So diagnostic solutions, Dr. Devi Shetty, I know our chairman from SIDBI had put up some examples, but if you look at Dr. Devi Shetty and what he's doing, as he will tell you, in a way that only a doctor can say this, he says if you don't have to cut the patient, you don't need to meet them in 80% of the cases. You don't need to meet them. So we have to come up with solutions, which we are right now, which we're working on. And this is an end-to-end solution, a business process management coupled with technology solution, whereby the entire process of using a smartphone, taking a pulse, doing all of that, but more importantly, getting a doctor to diagnose it and actually interpret the results is actually happening right now. If we can build these solutions as being built for a cost which is really low, I don't see no reason why you wouldn't be able to transport it around the world. Regulations matter, lots of rules, lots of compliance to be thought about, lots of licensing, etc., to be thought about. Along with that, cybersecurity, places like that, the cloud, robotics, these are huge areas where if we build expertise to service all the industries around that, it would be very powerful. We must build real products, and in my view, India must strive to own the services market around the world, much as China owns manufacturing. And if we can own the services market, given the brain power we have, it is the single largest strength any country can have. To own 25 to 30% of the world's workforce is a massive strength, and I think it's up to us to be able to leverage it. Don't believe the premature announcements of the death of IT services or the death of BPO or the death of cars or the death of this and the death of that. We've all heard this. I've only been hearing about the death of IT services for 20 years now. They're alive and well and kicking, and so is BPO, and so will many more industries be. Thank you very much.